This is Design Futurecast. I'm Lorena Lehman. In this 5th episode, the design experiment and result that we will investigate is called dynamic inversion. It is a procedural model and can be seen at designfuturecast.com/episode 5. So I'm here watching a tennis match, and I'm thinking about how interesting it is and fascinating that the human eye can focus quickly, in detail, back and forth as the ball moves during the game. This focusing and adjustment of the lens is really interesting, and I think it's a great example of how the human eye moves its components, its elements, to make different parts adjust to the needs of the person that's watching and seeing and perceiving. So during the game, my eyes move back and forth, adjusting in real time. So I'm interested in this next design in creating a composition in time that has components that move hierarchically, pushing and pulling one another. It leads me to think about biomimetics and how important that is in the world of design and creation. When we can learn how nature and elements like the human eye in this case work, we can get great insights and ideas into how to construct, create, and compose designs in innovative and new ways that allow for new types of innovation, in this case interactivity, adaptability, and adjustment. So just as my eyes are watching the ball bounce back and forth very quickly, in detail, adjusting and focusing the lens, it'll be interesting to see how a design can biomimetically interpret, translate, and learn from what the eye, the human eye, does. This design, dynamic inversion, was a really fun project to work on. It was inspired by the way the human eye flexes its muscles to contract the eye's lens. I'm really very intrigued by the way the eye muscles of the human work together to expand and contract an eye's lens, which in turn sets its focal distance adaptively. So I began to ask, what if environments could do this, to use their components to exude dynamic and adaptive behaviors in other components? It's a bit of kinetic and mechanical thinking combined with collaboration as well as interaction within this design. So I used XFrog to create this procedural model. I created a geometry that is not an exact replication of the way the human eye adapts its lens, but the design I created does capture the way components work together to create new emergent dynamic behaviors. As the geometric forms are set in motion, they engage in inverse twisting spherical actions that result in the unlocking of a new ever-changing, overarching geometry. And this overarching emergent geometry was a big surprise for me during the design process. So there were some results that occurred as a consequence of creating this design. Already, when completing the design, I could see it having impact on the making of materials for building designs and on the creation of new adaptive forms for world building and narrative creation for not only physical real-world architecture, but also for the visionary worlds used in the storytelling of books, films, and video games. This design shows how at every scale, each element really matters when it comes to dynamic, ever-changing narrative. That is, each element has a role to play as an overarching behavior emerges and is born. And when you couple this with the viewer's changing perspective, the narrative unfolds new and unexpected ways of seeing. Just as the eye muscles expand and contract the lens for adaptive focusing by the eye to see, a great design work can use its elements to create an unfolding and adaptive array of nonlinear narrative sequences. In this case, the person experiencing the design, whether it's a building, book, film, or video game, changes the story because of what they choose to focus upon. This is the difference between creating a static narrative and one that changes in real time, depending on the viewer's perception. Also, the voids are just as important as the solids in this design. In other words, what you leave out, the intentional gaps in your design, allow the viewer to fill them in. And this all leads to some very interesting questions. For instance, when creating a design narrative, the surrounding world context for your design, how do you decide what to leave in and take out? This also makes one consider using both direct and indirect methods for narrative and storytelling within your design. For example, this is the difference between framing a sunrise within a window perfectly placed within an architectural room to be discovered by the viewer spontaneously, versus displaying a sign that provides timing for when the sunrise will appear in that same window, so the viewer can plan their sunrise viewing moment. In this case, is the former or the latter more powerful of an experience? Perhaps the latter spontaneous sunrise moment is most powerful. But then what if no one ever sees the sunrise because they keep missing it? The creator must find poetic ways to invite and evoke the meaningful experience in ways that add to the design and do not detract from it. And once this happens, the design has a certain impact. Just as the eye's muscles and lens work together to see, a design must use its collaborating and coordinating components to move people, to connect with them emotionally. This is the power of narrative and storytelling in design for most all mediums. For maximum impact, make an impression. Tap into the 5 levels of experience: the physiological, the intellectual, the emotional, the behavioral, and the spiritual. But do so with poetic designing, where what you leave out is as important as what you leave in, as is how you go about doing it. So for 21st century application, it's important to consider that in an age with emerging technologies being integrated into environments, which are real, virtual, or fictional, it is important to understand the power and opportunity of participant interaction. Technologies allow for greater personalization, responsiveness, and choice, but with that comes greater narrative complexity. As an architect, artist, writer, filmmaker, or game designer, use complexity to your advantage. Use the voids together with the solids in your designs. This does not mean leaving important questions unanswered, but it does mean defining and revealing the critical constructs and framework within your design, so people experiencing it can engage and interpret meaning that makes it their own. For more inspiration and education on creativity, design, and architecture, visit designfuturecast.com/subscribe. There you can join the thousands of subscribers who regularly get my Design Insight Digest delivered straight to their email inbox. I think you will love the inspirational and educational articles, designs, and special invitations offered through this publication. Again, simply visit designfuturecast.com/subscribe to join the Design Insight Digest. I look forward to seeing you there.